he just went low. He's in his hand. He's in his hand. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Mantez 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. We only have one team to talk about this week. Obviously, it's not Liverpool. They've only got transfer news basically before their seasons start with the EPL, with the Champions League and what have you. The Wanderers season is over as well. And obviously, we don't have to talk about the Giants because they have the bye this week. They will play West Coast next week. But they don't play this week. They have the week off. Their last bye of the season before, obviously, finals comes around. So we'll see what happens with them. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. But first off, we've got to talk about the Titans on Sunday. And they're the only team that we have to talk about this week, really, in terms of any games. So let's talk about the Titans. Well, the lighting is going to be bad, but it is Sunday night. The game finished probably about maybe an hour ago, maybe a little bit less than that. And the Titans, once again, go down at home and lose to the Cowboys, though it was much closer this time than it was the first time we played the Cowboys this year. It was 30 points to 24. Pretty average performance, I will say, from the team in general. We had our opportunities to stamp the game, and ultimately the Cowboys themselves really played our type of game and were dropping the ball a lot. Obviously there was some wet weather as well, which didn't help things, but our first half was pretty atrocious. And I mean, it was for the Cowboys as well. Obviously they led 12-6 at halftime as well, so the 6-point margin that they ended up having basically from halftime was the key factor that went into their win over us at the end of the game. But yeah, I don't know where these wins are going to come from. I don't know where the points are going to come from, because that's 24 points again that we've scored, which is a decent amount, but it's seeming to be the highest amount of points that we can score in a game this year. And in general, it's actually, I think it's the third or fourth highest score that we've had all year. And we're still conceding 30 plus points every game. Obviously, it's 30 for this game in particular, but yeah, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. I think I'm out of, there's no real excuses for this team, honestly. I know we have some injuries out, there's some players out, but we've had two situations where we could have got off the bottom of the ladder, both playing Parramatta last week and playing the Cowboys this week. Both that have been under pressure. Obviously, Parramatta lost last night as well. I didn't even mention that in the next segment, obviously, what we'll talk about, because I recorded that first, just so you're aware. And I'll say it in that segment part of the video as well, that obviously I did record that before the game. Currently, Fremantle are playing, and they're up by 3 points against the Saints. So it's about at halftime. So it's about the time that we're talking and making this video. But yeah, it's not good enough from a lot of the team. There's a lot of issues, a lot of errors, dropping the ball a decent amount, especially in the first half, was pitiful. Only scored 6 points. I mean, yes, the Cowboys only scored 6 more points than we did in the first half, but they looked much better towards at least the first 20 to 25 minutes. Then they fell apart a little bit, and then it was points fest after that. But just they just kept that two try buffer until basically right at the end. So yeah, it's another bitter pill to swallow. Thankfully, it's not 50 plus points that we conceded in total from a team, thankfully. But yes, we head into the bye with another loss, 2 losses on the trot. Yes, we'll get 2 points from the bye next week, obviously, but that still leaves us adrift at the bottom of the ladder. Obviously, with a lot of teams that still have to play. If I look around, obviously we're only behind South Sydney by 27 still. Actually, I don't think that's updated. That game hasn't no, it hasn't updated. But we only lost by another 6, so it's so it's like 30 odd points. But obviously the Eels don't play next week. They've got the bye as well. The Knights have also got the bye. The Tigers have got the Roosters, and South Sydney have got Manly. So realistically, getting the 2 points from the bye, yes, is great, because obviously that'll put us up to 14 competition points, and with the rest of the field near the bottom, obviously the Knights and the Eels will jump to 16, obviously with next week's byes. So it'll be the Tigers, the Rabbitohs and the Titans on the bottom on 14 points if the Tigers and the Rabbitohs don't win. And then it'll just be on in terms of points, but obviously the Tigers would have to lose by like 50, 60 odd to the Roosters, which I don't think is going to happen. And Manly, who knows with them, because they've been inconsistent. Yes, they're up to 9th now, but Manly have been very inconsistent and obviously had the bye this week. So yeah, it's not looking great, because after the bye, obviously we've got some hard games coming up. We've obviously got the Broncos at home after the bye. Who knows what that scoreline's going to look like, because that's after Origin 3. And it's the Sunday as well. So literally it's going to have all the Origin stars back in both sides, you would think, unless they get injured in the game. Then after that it's the Tigers, the Warriors, the Panthers, and then we play the Rabbitohs. So we play the Rabbitohs in like 5 weeks. But yeah, the result today, there's a little bit of effort there from the team, from some of the players on the team, but it's just not good enough. It's not good enough. And I think at this point, probably not going to get off the bottom of the ladder at this point. I very much doubt that we won't have the wooden spoon at this point, because we've had so many opportunities to win games against teams that have been in around in the mix around our position, because even you're looking at the Cowboys, they're only like 1 point outside of the bottom 5 teams. They were all on 14 points leading into this game, and then obviously the app hasn't updated, so they're in front by 3 points at this point now, outside of the bottom 5 of the table. So yeah, not good enough from the Gold Coast. It's another loss, and thankfully it's at least a close loss, but another loss nonetheless. So yeah, pretty despondent, but it's one of those things when you go for a team that's doing absolutely shit house right now. And that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team. Obviously, when I'm actually recording this part of the video, it's actually the day before. It's actually Sunday. So the game actually hasn't even started yet for the Titans, just due to the fact that plays in a couple of hours in terms of the time of this recording. So we won't talk about them. Obviously, we'll talk about results around the league. And obviously, Fremantle don't play until later for the Giants. And speaking of the Giants, they are outside of the 8 right now, obviously, with the Western Bulldogs winning and the Gold Coast finally winning and snapping their losing streak as well. They won against the Demons in a pretty close game. It's pretty funny because ultimately there was a close game between them, and then obviously a decently close game, or a closer game than a lot of people thought, with Collingwood and West Coast. For 3 quarters, Collingwood, I think, really took West Coast very lightly, and I think they actually were behind multiple times against West Coast Collingwood, so They did surge in the second half, especially in the last quarter. They booted away, but they were even at 10 points at three-quarter time ahead of the West Coast Eagles. So the Eagles very much were looked upon very lightly with Collingwood. And yes, Collingwood are up 2.5 games at this point, but if there was any game that they could have dropped, it would have been this one. I wouldn't have given them any fault of dropping this one, just due to the fact that obviously, West Coast is a team at the bottom of the ladder. Bring in a lot of your new recruits from the Collingwood side. Have some of your players take a breather for that game, because ultimately you'd think they're not really going to be a threat, but ultimately it almost blew up in their face, especially the first three quarters, and almost blew up in their face massively. But West Coast played well. They played well under the roof at Marvel, playing away from home, and they do play relatively well at Marvel in previous years. Obviously, with the run of form that they are in at the moment, obviously it's not great, especially the last year or two. For them, it's not an ideal spot. But they put up a good fight against Collingwood. Like I said, Collingwood, I'm pretty sure, took West Coast very lightly. And obviously the Giants are going to Western Australia to play the West Coast Eagles at Optus Stadium. So we'll see what happens with them. Hopefully they can get a win there. But I don't think that the Giants will obviously take West Coast lightly. They did beat them very convincingly earlier on in the season, and this is a game that is a possibility that if we play relatively well, we can boost up our percentage, which I hope to God we can, because our percentage, like I said last week, when we were still in the top 8, obviously we are not. Obviously Fremantle has still got to play, but they play the Saints, and they've got to get absolutely demolished to be any spot in dropping way out of the 8 into 9th. So the Giants are in 9th at the moment. Obviously the bye doesn't give us any points in the AFL, whereas in the NRL it does. It does give you competition points. So obviously we're outside the 8 looking in, due to percentage and due to other teams playing and winning their games, like Gold Coast and the Western Bulldogs. And obviously we'll see with Fremantle. At this point they haven't played yet, but you would think that Fremantle, based on current form, should beat the Saints. But you never know. The Saints could turn up and cause a boil-over. And hopefully, if it is a boil-over, it's a huge one for the sake of my Giants. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, like I said, the West Coast game, very important for our percentage. We obviously want the 4 points, 4 premiership points, competition points. Obviously, so we want to win against West Coast, but if we can build on and put a hefty deficit on West Coast again, like we did the first time we played them at NG Stadium, that'd be great for our percentage, and especially going into the tail end of the season. Every game matters at this point, every point matters, and every percentage point matters as well. And that's what's going to happen at this point, because there's a lot of teams there, Gold Coast, Western Bulldogs, Fremantle, GWS, even Hawthorn. They won as well, but they were on the same amount of points before their win as well against North Melbourne. They were in a situation where they could have fell out if they lost, or they lost heavily. Their percentage wasn't really great. Obviously, with the massive win that they had over North Melbourne, that'll help them in their stead, but any one of those teams could drop out with percentage, and obviously with the Giants, it's the least amount of percentage. So we're looking for big wins now, and hopefully this West Coast game can be one of those. Ultimately, we still play the Saints as well. We've got some big games obviously coming up as well with Geelong, with Sydney. We've got Essendon down in Melbourne in between those two games in terms of the Sydney Derby against the Swans at NG, and obviously playing the Cats at NG as well. So we have some big games in between there. I think we got North Melbourne in Canberra as well, so that's another big game there as well. So we'll see what happens. Ultimately, we're looking for a lot of games with pretty convincing wins to boost our percentage, because to boost that percentage by quite a lot, you got to win, and you got to win heavily in some of these games. So hopefully it starts with West Coast, but we'll see what happens. West Coast at this point of the season compared to when we played them, very different beast. So we'll see what happens with the Giants. Obviously they got to travel to Perth, but West Coast have also got to do that on the way back now. They probably actually would be doing that now in terms of a team, or whether they're doing it last night after their game against Collingwood. So we'll see what happens with the Giants. But apart from that, NRLW doesn't start till next week. So obviously we'll talk about the girls when we talk about the Titans next week as well. Obviously the men's will have the bye, so we'll actually talk about the Titans women just in general in terms of the NRL and NRLW. We'll be talking about them next week because obviously the Titans men's team is on the bye next week after this game against the Cowboys later today. So we'll see how they go in the start of the season as well. Obviously there's been some heavy defeats. One which was the Rabbits going down against the Dolphins. The Dolphins piled on 50 points to another team again. 22-point deficit for the Rabbitohs. As a Titans fan, you kind of wanted that to blow out a little bit more because their for and against the Rabbits is the second worst, obviously, compared to second worst in the competition. Obviously, the Titans are first, so I think we got to win by 27 today, which obviously you would have talked about. I would have talked about that game already, but of course, as I said, this part of the video is being recorded before that game even plays. So we'll see if they do get a win first off and do get a decent deficit as well. Obviously to bite into that deficit of for and against as well. But we'll see what happens. Obviously we've got to get the 2 points first. That's the first thing. And then obviously the Rabbits have still got 2 byes left, and we've still got the 1 bye, which obviously will be next week. But apart from that, there's been some good results. Obviously, the Bulldogs going down against the Panthers, but it was a very, very close game. It was 8 points to 6. So it wasn't like it was a complete blowout. It was very much like a semi-finals type of game for both teams. So the Bulldogs losing is not great because they've dropped from the top of the table to go into second with their loss, and obviously Canberra's win on Friday night. But in a situation, it's not a bad game to drop. Obviously, yes, the Bulldogs have lost a couple on the way through, but the Canberra Raiders have just been winning and winning. So Canberra being on top of the table makes sense, and they kind of do deserve it because they've been through hell and back, and they almost lost the game on Friday night. They almost lost the game last week on Friday against the Tigers as well. So props to the Canberra Raiders. They are a force to be reckoned with, and probably almost at this point have cemented a top 4 finish. But well, I didn't mess up the outro, but obviously you guys will never know because my camera wasn't hooked up to my charger, and obviously when I was recording, it went flat. So, and right in the middle of me talking about the Canberra Raiders, it was almost pretty much finished, the last segment as well, so I'm going to kind of cut that out. But as I was saying, obviously the Canberra Raiders do deserve it. They've been through hell and back. They've played relatively well all season long. They've had a couple of games, obviously, that have dropped on the way past, but there's been some really, really good games for the Canberra Raiders, for the Bulldogs, obviously, for the Panthers as well. They're doing great. The Dolphins have been pretty much more hit than miss this season. Obviously, at the start of the season, they weren't looking great, and then they've come home relatively well until now with a pretty full sail. But yeah, there's a lot of things that obviously is going on with that top 4 at the moment. Obviously, you've got, the Canberra Raiders on top for the first time in 22 years, I think was the stat. So that's great for them, great for their fans as well, being on top. Then the Bulldogs, obviously behind them. mostly due to for and against, but obviously through competition points as well. I think now. Then you've got the Warriors that lost against Brisbane yesterday. So they're in third, and then obviously the Storm in fourth at this point. But there's a few teams that are beckoning around that position. Obviously the Panthers, I think, is one of them. I think they're in sixth at the moment. So so they're beckoning for that top four finish again, which the Panthers, you can't count them out. Like we talked about a month ago, seemed like they were dead and buried. They were down in last place, and then they've just ascended. And that's the thing with how many competition points, and even for the Titans at this point as well, they obviously need to win a lot more games, and obviously need a lot of more teams to lose in front of them. But there's only a couple of games between the bottom, even the bottom four, and into the top eight. So at this point, it hasn't actually fully stretched the season that far and the competition that far that it's unattainable to get even a spot in there. Obviously, with the Titans, they've got a lot of things that they have to go their way to get in to finals and be in the top eight. But if it starts with a win against the Cowboys, that's fine. I doubt it at this point, but seen weirder things happen. So, and obviously with the Panthers this year, I've seen weirder things happen this year as well as previous years. So wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. Obviously, still mathematical chance. But yeah, apart from that, we don't have to talk about too much. Obviously, we talked about the AFL, we talked about the NRL. Obviously, the women's game for the NRLW doesn't start till next week, so we'll talk about some of that as well. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been my mentor. See? I was recording and I did this perfectly. And now that I'm trying to, and I got to re-record this, I've fucked up the outro again. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Mantos 100. You guys have a great day night. Of course, take care. I'm so bloody pissed. So bloody pissed.